Good morning. I'm Dr. Saujanya, Assistant Professor, Department of General Medicine. Today I'm assigned this topic of acute hepatitis. What is meant by hepatitis? Hepatitis means inflammation of the liver. This can be either acute or chronic. Hepatitis is said to be acute if it lasts for less than 6 months and chronic if it persists for more than 6 months. There can be several causes. They are classified as viral causes and non-viral causes. Today, we will be discussing in detail about these viral causes of hepatitis. But what are the non-viral causes? Alcohol. Youngsters binging this cheap liquor. They can present you with jaundice and abnormal liver function tests. So alcohol, especially cheap liquor, is one of the causes of acute hepatitis. And other causes are toxins. Toxins like mushrooms. If they consume some wild mushrooms, which consists of amanita-toxin in amanita phelloids, then after 2-3 days, they can present you with symptoms of acute hepatitis. Drugs like paracetamol. Paracetamol is one of the commonest drugs to cause acute hepatitis. For suicide, most of the females, this paracetamol, this is most commonly present in our house. So they can choose this for suicide. If they consume more than 4 grams of paracetamol in a day, then it causes a severe insult to the liver, causing acute hepatitis. And if a patient is not, usually paracetamol toxicity is treated with N-acetylcysteine. If we don't give N-acetylcysteine within 4 hours of consumption of this heavy doses, then can patient end in permanent liver failure. So that severe is paracetamol toxicity. Other drugs. To TB positive patients, we give ATT. In anti-tubercular treatment, the drugs which cause hepatitis most commonly is the pyrazinamide. And in females, autoimmune conditions can cause acute hepatitis, and toxins like carbon tetrachloride also. And other conditions like SLE and metabolic diseases like Wilson's, they can cause acute hepatitis. Today's topic of discussion mostly includes viral causes in detail. Viral causes are hepatitis A, B, E, C, and some rare causes are herpes simplex, CMV, that is cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr virus, and yellow fever virus. All these acute hepatitis viral causes, they have similar clinical picture. Pathological features are mostly similar. We cannot differentiate which virus is causing hepatitis, either A or B or B. Based on clinical picture, you cannot differentiate. You should go for serology. This DD of viral hepatitis should be considered in any patient presenting with transaminitis. Though they have similar clinical picture, all these viruses, their chronicity is different for each, and also severity is also different in long run. We should know one rule. What is that? Hepatitis B patient rule is 90% recovery. Hepatitis C patient rule is 90% suffering. What I mean by this? Hepatitis B patient 90% they cured. Only 10% they have this chronicity, cirrhosis, hepatocellular carcinoma. But hepatitis C patient, they don't. They have this chronic suffering because chronicity is very high. Once a patient gets infected, there is 50 to 80% chances of him becoming like chronic patient. Okay, but for hepatitis B, chronicity is very less. But in this exception is, if a child gets this infection from his mother during while the mother is pregnant, if she is hepatitis B positive, she can transmit this to the child, and this kind of transmission is called vertical transmission. So, vertical transmission in hepatitis B, it carries a risk of more than 90% for the child to become chronically infected with this. But in other individuals, adults who acquire this via other routes, the chance is less than 1%. Hepatitis A, it never shows this chronicity, and B, it's also very less because it basically, hepatitis D is always dependent on B. So once you get antibodies to this hepatitis B, chances of getting infected with B are also very less. So in this slide, you need to remember only 2 points. That is hepatitis B, 90% recovery is the rule. For hepatitis C, 90% suffering is the rule because chronicity is more for hepatitis C. All these viral hepatitis clinical picture is same. They have this non-specific prodromal illness, like headache, myalgia, joint pains, and nausea. They also have anorexia. All these symptoms, usually hepatitis means we get this picture of jaundice into our mind. But even before appearance of this jaundice, these anorexia and all these symptoms, they develop prior to the appearance of the elevated bilirubin levels. In this graph, look here, before elevation of the bilirubin levels, patient is showing some prodromal illness, nausea, anorexia, fatigue, malaise. Other symptoms are vomiting, diarrhea, and abdominal discomfort. Why is this abdominal discomfort? Because there is inflammation of the liver. There is edema around that. There is increase in the liver, so stretching of the liver capsule. So patient will have pain, okay, and abdominal discomfort and tenderness in the right upper quadrant. Patient presents to you with some non-specific symptoms, okay, and patient can also present with icterus. What is meant by icterus? This bilirubin deposition in the sclera of the eyes, yellowish discoloration of the eyes, jaundice, is called icterus. So, what are the normal levels of bilirubin? Normal levels of bilirubin in our body is less than 1. It's 1, up to 1. But yellowish discoloration will be seen only when the levels rise above 2. Okay, so where do you see? First, you can see under the tongue. At the tongue frenulum, you can see. First appears, but it is first detected in the sclera of the eyes. Why only in the sclera? Because sclera of the eyes has high concentration of the elastin when compared to other parts of the body. So, first increased bilirubin levels even before yellowish discoloration of the skin. This is first seen in the eyes because sclera has more elastic content when compared to the elastic content of the skin. So after the symptoms, we examine the patient and we elicit physical signs. As the patient is having acute hepatitis, the liver is tender and it is enlarged. How do you know it is enlarged? By measuring the liver span, by percussion and the palpation, you can see that liver is enlarged. Normal liver span is 12 to 15 centimeters. But if in acute hepatitis, this is enlarged and patient can have mild splenomegaly, and as it's a viral condition, patient can have some cervical lymphadenopathy also. Usually, viral hepatitis, they recover. Symptoms rarely last more than 4 to 4 days on an average. So here are some MCQs. For objective type of questions for your entrance, so I thought I would add this. We need to by heart this. I mean, not by heart, like you need to have a hand on all these MCQ bits here. Most common cause of acute viral hepatitis is hepatitis E. Okay. Most common cause of pulmonary hepatic failure in normal population is D, but in OBGYN, that is in pregnancy, in that department, most common cause of pulmonary hepatic failure in pregnancy is hepatitis E. So, for pulmonary hepatic failure, you can get 2 MCQs. Most common cause is hepatitis D, but in pregnancy, pulmonary hepatic failure causes hepatitis E. Most common cause of acute viral hepatitis is hepatitis E. Most common cause of chronic viral hepatitis is hepatitis C. Investigations, you check for your liver, you check for the patient's liver function test, you draw blood sample. The liver enzymes are elevated. Which enzymes are elevated? SGOT or SGPT? SGPT are elevated in viral hepatitis. Okay. If SGO2 elevation is more than SGPT, like if it's more than 2, then you should think in terms of alcoholic liver disease. Okay, if it is less than 2, you should think in terms of viral. And I told you bilirubin levels are increased. In that also, unconjugated bilirubin levels are increased more. Alkaline phosphatase levels are raised only in case of obstructive jaundice. Here we are dealing with hepatocellular jaundice, so they don't rise. And coming to coagulogram, prolongation of the PP. Why the prothrombin time is increased? Liver is the center for the production of all the clotting factors except factor 4 and factor 8. Where is the factor 4 produced? That is calcium. So you get it from your diet or from bones, everything. Where is the factor 8? Produced from the endothelial cells. So all other clotting factors are produced from the liver. So keeping in mind these clotting factors, what are the tests to be done? For coagulogram, you do bleeding time, prothrombin time, and APTT. But bleeding time will be normal because it is totally dependent on platelets, not clotting factors. But prothrombin time will be increased because the clotting factor 7, it has a very short half-life. So in acute liver failure, it will get reduced first, so prothrombin time will increase. In later stages, even the APTT also time increases. This is normal with related lymphocytosis, and mainly serological tests to be done to know whether it is hepatitis A or B or C or D or E. And management, most of the patients' recovery is not needed. Okay, you can just treat the patient on go-to basis. You should just advise some bed rest and no specific diet. If you give some normal regular diet, and you should instruct the patient to avoid alcohol during this phase because alcohol itself is a trigger and it can aggravate the disease. And in these patients, what are the drugs to be avoided? Sedatives and narcotics. And why? Because these are metabolized in the liver. So if there is some insult to the liver, you can't expect it to work with full function. So they should be avoided. And if there are any surgeries, better postpone them because there is a high risk of post-op liver failure if the patient is having acute hepatitis. Usually, patients don't need hospital care because most of them they cure. But very rarely, they can be complicated with liver failure. Okay, that is fulminant hepatitis. I told you fulminant hepatitis can be caused with hepatitis D and E if patient is pregnant. Or fulminant hepatitis can be caused if patient is exposed to higher doses of these toxins, especially paracetamol or the mushroom toxins. So in such conditions, a patient can land up in liver failure. Otherwise, transplantation is very rarely required. Let us discuss in detail about each virus. Hepatitis A. Okay, about hepatitis A. Hepatitis A and B, both these types, they have a common thing. Both have same transmission, that is fecal-oral route. Age difference is almost similar for both children and young adults. Okay. So if you avoid this fecal-oral route transmission, you can bring down the levels of this infection. Incubation period for hepatitis A is 15 to 45 days and mean age is 30 days. Onset is acute. I told you hepatitis A virus, it never shows chronicity. It always has this acute nature. Okay. It belongs to the coronavirus group of enterovirus. All this is theory. I told you its spread is fecal-oral route. When is a virus excreted in the feces from the patient? Is it after the patient is clinically evident or even much before? even much before it is excreted, 2 to 3 weeks before clinical evidence or lab evidence, the virus is excreted in the feces. Look at this diagram. Here, even before elevation of the liver enzymes or even before clinically evident jaundice, there is shedding 2 to 3 weeks before the virus is shed in the feces. So what happens if it is like this? Transmission rates are very high, especially in some areas in overcrowded populations and in poor sanitation conditions. And 30% of the adults, they have this serological evidence of past infection, though they don't have any evidence of jaundice, but serological evidence is in 30% of the adult individuals. Common in India due to overcrowding and poor sanitation. I told you there is no chronic stage for hepatitis A. Then how do you diagnose? You check for antibodies, anti-HIV. Okay, anti-HIV is important diagnosis of hepatitis A, but this is present only transiently during the incubation period. IgM type is diagnostic, and within 3 months of recovery, titers fall, and then IgG appear. IgM have diagnostic value. IgG type of antibody, no diagnostic value, but it tells whether patient has immune to HIV or not. So in hepatitis A, for diagnosis, IgM anti-HIV is diagnosed. How do you manage? It's very simple. As the spread is fecal-oral route, we need to improve the social conditions. We need to improve the public toilets. We need to improve sanitation. Sanitation measures should be taken care of, and overcrowding should be avoided. There is also active immunization for this, and immunization with immunoglobulin should be given whenever there is an epidemic. Okay, there is outbreaks of hepatitis in schools and nurseries. All these children, if there is an outbreak, the immunoglobulin should be given. And whenever you're traveling to endemic areas, vaccination can protect you. Management, I already told you, it's all symptomatic treatment only. There is no antivirals for hepatitis A virus. And it's usually curable. Liver failure is very rare. It's 0.1%. And chronicity doesn't occur. And it's not a life-threatening disease. But if the patient is having background chronic liver disease, upon this background chronic liver disease, if the patient is getting infected with hepatitis A virus, then it is very serious. Coming to hepatitis B, this is one of the important topic in viral hepatitis because it has many questions. Structure of hepatitis B is one question, and the serology. The serological markers of hepatitis B is a question. And this is also one of the common cause of hepatocellular carcinoma. Okay, so it has more weightage when compared to other hepatitis types. Hepatitis B is most common cause, leading cause of transfusion-associated hepatitis. In blood banks, the blood, when they are collecting blood from the donors, that blood should be screened. After collection, it should be screened before giving to the recipient for HIV, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, malaria, and syphilis. All these 5 should be screened for. Okay. And transfusion-associated hepatitis is most common with hepatitis B. How it is spread? Okay, it is spread via sexual contact, percutaneous needle sharing, intravenous drug abusers, sexual contact, and also I told you via blood transfusion. This is the leading cause of transfusion-associated hepatitis, and also via vertical transmission. Okay. What is the incubation period? Once the virus enters into the body, it takes around 30 to 180 days. That is on an average 60 to 90 days. Onset is either insidious or acute onset, and the age group are usually young adults who participate in this who have these multiple sexual partners, and also IV drug abuse. Okay? And the babies can get affected due to vertical transmission from mother. I'd like to discuss the percentage chances of transmission. If a mother transmits to her baby via vertical transmission, then there are 90% chances of transmission to the neonate. Healthcare workers, especially our interns and sisters, they can get this needle stick injury while placing cannula or while drawing blood. They can get infected due to the needle stick injury. How much chances of transmission due to needle stick injury? That you should know, because that is very important. For hepatitis B, it is 30% chances of transmission. When compared to HIV, which is only 0.3 percentage. You should know this. Hepatitis B via needle stick injury it is 30%, whereas for HIV it's only 0.3 percentage. Okay. Vertical transmission for HIV it is 30%. So transmission I told you is sexual, percutaneous, and perinatal. That is vertical. Hepatitis B structure. You are suspecting some viral hepatitis. You draw blood and you examine under the microscope. We can find the virus particle. All other viruses are usually spherical, but this hepatitis B, it has both spherical and tubular forms. Okay, mostly it is spherical form. This hepatitis B is a double shell structure, also called as Dehn particle. Okay, its diameter is around 42 nanometers, and the DNA is double-stranded DNA. In other viruses, usually single-stranded, but here it is double-stranded. They also say it is partially single-stranded, partially double-stranded also. It has an enzyme, core enzyme called as DNA polymerase, which needs for virus replication, of course. And this core is surrounded by H-base AG. This is a surface protein. And remember, humans are the only source of infection for hepatitis B. This is Dehn particle, hepatitis B structure. The outermost antigens are the hepatitis B antigen. You can find this in our blood circulation. In the blood circulation of the patient, you can check for these antigens. And as you go inside, you have a core. The core antigens are HPC antigen. These, in the patient, these core antigens, they enter the nucleus of the hepatocyte and they remain in the nucleus of the hepatocyte. They are never seen in the bloodstream of the patient. And as you go inside, you can have this genome that is a double-stranded DNA and an enzyme called as DNA polymerase. And just note here, between the outer layer and the core part, there are some star shell structures, which I marked like this. This is HBe antigen. This HBe antigen, you can also extract this antigen from the bloodstream. This antigen is responsible for infectivity and also replication of the virus. We need to practice this image, because if hepatitis B question is asked, in that question you should definitely draw this image. Hepatitis B is the most common cause of chronic liver disease in India. Remember, highest chances of chronicity is for hepatitis C. But for chronic liver disease, most common cause of chronic liver disease is hepatitis B. Most chance of chronicity is seen for hepatitis C. There is a difference in between these two sentences. Okay. Most common cause of hepatocellular carcinoma is hepatitis B. But here also in MCQs they can ask you. Most common cause of HCC in India and Africa is hepatitis B. But in America, as hepatitis C is found in higher is found more. In America, most common cause of hepatocellular carcinoma is hepatitis C. And I mentioned earlier, most common cause of transfusion associated hepatitis is hepatitis B. And these are all something memory based. 1/3 of the world's population shows some serological evidence of hepatitis B. Okay, 350 to 400 million people are chronic H-base AG carriers. Many individuals, I told you hepatitis B starting, 90% recovery is the rule. Okay? Mostly they are asymptomatic and they get cured by 4 months. That is why you don't give antivirals for every hepatitis B positive patients, because most of them they cure by themselves. But for every hepatitis C, if you get a chance to detect hepatitis C in earlier stages, treatment should be started immediately. But for hepatitis B, it's not like that because most of them they cure. Only once the patient is highly infected and the viral loads are high, you start treatment for hepatitis B. Vertical transmission, I told you that baby, if he acquires via vertical transmission, has highest risk of chronic infection. There is one more antigen called as HPX antigen in this virus. This antigen, it prevents apoptosis, okay, by inhibiting CD95. So this antigen is responsible for development of cancer, that is hepatocellular carcinoma. Remember, like HIV virus is directly toxic to the lymphocyte cells. But here it's not like that. Virus is not directly toxic. It induces some inflammation, and the inflammatory mediators which are released in that inflammation, they attack the liver cells, not the virus directly. Okay. This is serology showing like how do you interpret this diagram? Okay. This x-axis showing number of weeks after exposure, and in y-axis we have all these markers. First thing what I want to tell is, in our body, once the virus enters after infection, the first serological evidence of infection is shown by the appearance of hepatitis B antigen. It rises and peaks at 12 weeks and it falls and it touches baseline at 24 weeks. That is, by 6 months, its levels will disappear in the blood. But even after 6 months, if levels of HBS are still detected in the blood, then it is said that the patient is having chronic hepatitis. That is chronic hepatitis B. After 24 weeks, there is some gap. Look at the baseline, there is some gap after 24 weeks, and the green color line starts around some 26 or 27 weeks. The green color is development of antibodies against this surface antigen. Antibodies to the surface antigen, once they appear in the blood, then what does that mean? The protective mode has started for the patient. He is starting to recover. Okay? But there is a gap between disappearance of the antigen and appearance of the antibodies. This gap is called as gap period. At this stage, how do you know whether this patient is having infection or not? You should check for antibodies against the core antigens. I told you core antigens never appear in the blood, but antibodies to that appear in the blood. So you should check for antibodies to the core antigen. Those antibodies of IgM type, they appear early. They are the first antibodies to appear, and they reach peak and the plateau with the appearance of IgG type. And this HBEG, it is present right from the beginning. That is, it is a marker of replication, right? So it is present right from the beginning, and by 18 weeks it disappears because antibodies to that appear at that time. You should compare this serological pattern with enzyme and also the clinical jaundice. First one to appear in a patient infected with hepatitis B is HBS antigen. After this HBS antigen, your security system will enter, that is antibodies. IgM will enter, that is antibodies to the core antigen. Then your enzymes start rising. Okay? So it's like this. Let me put it like this. First to appear is HBsAg, then your ALT will rise, and then last jaundice will appear. And also during recovery, first to disappear is jaundice. Next your ALT levels will fall. After that, your HbA1c levels will fall down. Okay, this pattern you should remember. HbA1c to rise, first is HbA1c, then ALT, then jaundice. During recovery, first to fall is jaundice, next ALT, and next HbA1c. Never to appear in the blood is HCV, and marker of infectivity or marker of replication is hepatitis HBeAg. And also to know the severity, to know the viral load in the patient, you should check for DNA. Okay? You should check for hepatitis B virus DNA. How do you check? By polymerase chain reaction. If the viral loads are more than 10 to the power 5 copies per DNA per ml with raised HTTP, then it indicates severe. This slide I already discussed. HbA1c presence indicates active infection. Negative test indicates infection is unlikely. After incubation period of 3 to 4 weeks, it appears in the blood. It will be present up to 6 months. Presence more than 6 months indicates chronic infection. Antibodies to this surface antigen, I discussed in that graph. It appears after 6 months, that is after 24 weeks, and it persists for many years, lifetime. If in a patient there are antibodies to the surface antigen, you can come to two conclusions. Either patient was previously infected or patient was previously vaccinated. How do you differentiate? If there are antibodies to the core antigen along with this antibodies to surface antigen, then you can tell that patient had previous infection. But there are no antibodies to the core antigen. There are only antibodies to the surface antigen. Then you can tell that patient had previous vaccination. Antibodies to the core antigen. What is the significance of IgM variety? Whenever there is IgM variety, it indicates patient is still in active infection. And in window period there is no surface antigen, there is no antibodies to the surface antigen. There are antibodies, IgM type to the core antibodies. They reveal an acute infection in the window period of the gap period. This HBeAg, I already told you, it's a marker of viral replication and infectivity. It disappears once the production of antibodies starts. If the patient is going into chronicity, what happens? HBsAg will persist for more than 6 months. So HBsAg will be positive. IgG type of antibodies to the core antigen will be present. In these patients, if there is also positive HBeAg, then it indicates active replication of the virus. But if there is absence of HBeAg, then it implies low viral replication. Exception is a Precourt mutant. It is found in some parts of Europe where the HBeAg is not found in the blood. It doesn't mean the virus is not replicating. It is just not found in the blood. So that type is actually dangerous. That is called Precourt mutant. I told you by PCR, you can check the viral load. And there is some typing mistake here. It is not 105, it is 10 to the power 5. Okay. Viral load more than 10 to the power 5 copies per ml indicates active viral replication. Less than 10 to the power 5 indicates low replication. So, in your wards, if you get a report telling HBsAg positive, that indicates some patient is having infection, hepatitis B infection. But you should know whether it is active infection, whether it is acute infection or chronic infection, whether it is active, or not active. You should order for HBV DNA levels, and also for that you need to order for HBV DNA viral load and antibodies to the core antigen. There will be some permutations and combinations. there is only HbsAg positive and IgM positive to the core, then it is acute hepatitis. In window period, only IgM to core antigen will be present. In chronic hepatitis, both HbsAg and IgG type to core antigen will be present. In vaccinated individual, only anti-HBs antibodies will be present. Even this is same. Management of hepatitis B in acute phase, it is symptomatic because 90% is 90% recovery is the rule. So you should just treat the patient supportively of a fever or tenderness, weakness and all. But if the patient is landing up in acute liver failure which occurs in less than 1%, then you need to keep patient in ICU and monitor accordingly. Full recovery is possible in 90 to 95% of the patient, and in 5 to 10% they can have this chronic condition. But if it's vertical transmission, recovery is very rare. How about this infection in immunodeficient individuals and Down syndrome? In those individuals, it shows chronic form. I told you fulminant liver failure is in less than 1% of the cases. Combined hepatitis B and Delta virus, it's more aggressive disease. I'll discuss this while teaching you about hepatitis D virus. How can you prevent this? We can prevent by practicing safer sex, and also by preventing needle sharing, and also screening blood products before transfusion, and also cut short the transmission, vertical transmission from mother to child. By that you can prevent. What are the other methods? By vaccination, active immunization and passive immunization. Active immunization with vaccine, a recombinant hepatitis B vaccine, Energix, is capable of producing active immunization in 95% of the individuals. This is not effective if the patient is already infected. Whenever there is a needle prick, we should take immunoglobulins within 6 hours. And the vaccine schedule is 0, 6 weeks, and 10 to 14 weeks. So 0. Even the newborns immediately after birth, within 6 hours, immunoglobulin should be given, and at 12 months of age, that is at first birthday, they should be checked for hepatitis B serology. Check for all the antibodies to the core, antibodies to the surface antigen, antibodies to the HBeAg. How about if the patient has co-infection with HIV? If hepatitis B and HIV occur together in a patient, then the morbidity and mortality is very high, because in HIV individuals, as there is immunosuppression, there will be loss of the anti-HBs antibodies. So there will be reactivation of the infection, and there will be aggressive nature leading to death, cirrhosis and sepsis. Let's discuss hepatitis D virus. Hepatitis D virus, it has some RNA defective virus. It always depends on hepatitis B for infection. So how can you prevent this? In India, if there is 100% coverage of complete population with hepatitis B, so if 100% coverage, then this hepatitis D can be eradicated. What is the route of spread? Same like hepatitis B, percutaneous, sexual, perinatal. Age difference also is same like hepatitis B, insidious or active. Its incubation period is 30 to 180 days, mean is 60 to 90 days. It has no independent existence, so it depends on B for its infection. Here, there are two terms called as co-infection and superinfection. For hepatitis B and hepatitis D combination, there are two terms, co-infection and superinfection. What is meant by that? If the patient is having acute hepatitis B, that is HBs AG positive, IgM to the core antibody positive, along with that, if the patient also has IgM antibodies to anti-HTV, IgM anti-HTV antigen, like both B and D are active in that patient, then it's called co-infection. It has high chances of chronic infection. Okay, chronicity is high if there is co-infection. But if the patient is having chronic hepatitis B, chronic, how do you say? HBs AD will be positive, IgG antibodies will be present to the core antibodies. Upon this chronic hepatitis B, if the patient has acute hepatitis D, then it is called superinfection. If both are active hepatitis B, active hepatitis D, then it is called co-infection. It has high chances of chronicity. But, okay, that is one term for co-infection. Term for superinfection, how do you define? Chronic hepatitis B, upon that active hepatitis D, then it is called superinfection. Superinfection, the word super, what does it tells you? The virus is very vigorous. I mean, that infection is very severe. It can cause severe hepatic failure, fulminant hepatic failure, and it can lead to death of the individual if liver transplantation not done. How do you investigate anti-HDV antibodies? This slide discusses about superinfection. This is what I explained on the previous slide. Management is symptomatic. Once the hepatitis B virus is treated effectively, then automatically hepatitis B will come under control. So 100% coverage of all the Indian population, okay, with hepatitis B protection, then B can be eradicated automatically. Everything will fall in place then. Coming to the next virus, hepatitis C. What is the rule for hepatitis C? 90% suffering. Hepatitis B, 90% recovery. Hepatitis C, 90% suffering. I am repeating this time and again so that you will remember this. Okay. Transmission for hepatitis C, it's again parental transmission only. Mostly IV drug abusers. Okay. Via that route, it is spread more commonly than the blood transfusions. Okay. Blood transfusions ante chaala varaku hepatitis B valla. Blood transfusions valla వచ్చే virus hepatitis B. IV drug abuse valla ఎక్కువగా వచ్చేది hepatitis C. Okay, that you should remember for your MCQs. This hepatitis C, 90% chronicity, I told you, because it activates the stellate cells in the hepatocytes. So what happens if stellate cells are activated? Lots of fibroblasts will be produced. So lots of scarring, cirrhosis of the liver occurs. So end-stage liver disease, will put that patient and we might require liver transplantation again. I told you hepatitis B, mostly we don't give antivirals because 2-3 months he will recover. Only chronic on the active on it, then you give her antivirals. But hepatitis C, it is not like that. Chronicity is pakka. So why do we need to wait? Because once it is chronic, the patient will develop cirrhosis. So whenever you get a chance to check for hepatitis C virus in the blood of the patient, you should check for HCV RNA and anti-HCV antibodies. Anti-HCV antibodies are best, but it takes time. So you should check for HCV RNA. I told you for hepatitis B, there will be cutoffs. If copies are more, viral copies are more than 10 to the power 5, it is high replication. Like there is some cutoff for hepatitis B. For hepatitis C, there is no cutoff. Okay. If you happen to find HCV RNA, then you should immediately start treatment. What is the drug of choice? Drug of choice for hepatitis C is ledipsabil. Actually, based on genotyping, you give drugs. In India, genotype 1 of hepatitis C virus is more common, so drug of choice is Ledip-7. Genotype for genotype 2 on PCR, if you get it is a genotype 2, then you give sofosbuvir plus ribavirin. Okay. So even a single evidence is present to start antivirals in hepatitis C. Incubation period for this is 15 to 160 days. Average is 15 days. Onset insidious or acute, 50 to 80% chances of chronicity. It is a RNA flavivirus. Most individuals are unaware of when they become infected and are identified only when they develop chronic liver disease. 80% of the individuals exposed to the virus become chronically infected, and late spontaneous viral clearance is rare. Serology, it takes some 6 to 12 weeks for antibodies to appear in the blood following acute infection. This RNA can be detected as early as 2 to 4 weeks. So we should always rely on hepatitis C RNA, okay, rather than antibodies, because antibodies will take time. But RNA within 2 to 4 weeks of infection, it can be identified in the blood. Even before rise of SGPT, RNA can be detected. This is in this slide, I want to highlight the appearance of the HCV RNA is before the appearance of antibodies. Okay, so you should always check for HCV RNA. If you are getting positive PCR HCV RNA, then immediately you should start antivirals, Ledip-7, which is the drug of choice, to prevent chronicity, which can lead to end-stage liver disease. And the levels of the ALT are always fluctuating. Okay? In this slide, I'm telling you the point that LFTs may be normal or there are fluctuations. Jaundice can occur in end-stage liver disease. Hepatitis E. Most common cause of active viral hepatitis is hepatitis E. Most common cause of chronic viral hepatitis is C. Most common cause of carriers, B. Most common cause of fulminant hepatic failure, D. Most common cause of fulminant hepatic failure in pregnancy, E. All these objectives you should memorize, because they can create confusion while marking your options in your exam. Hepatitis E is similar to A. Both of them have same routes of transmission, fecal-oral route, and age difference is also same. This is caused by an RNA virus. Earlier it was endemic in India and in Middle East, but now it is increasing across Asia, Europe. So this is no longer seen only in travelers from endemic area. It can be found anywhere. Clinical presentation, management, everything is like hepatitis A, and the chronicity is rare, and in most cases it is self-limited. Only difference is that hepatitis E during pregnancy is associated with development of acute liver failure, which has high mortality for both mother and the child. That should be remembered. In acute infection, IgM antibodies to E virus are positive. I discussed so far hepatitis A, B, C, D, E. There are other forms of viral hepatitis. There is a term called as non-A, non-B, non-C, or non-E, non-AE hepatitis. This is the term used to describe hepatitis thought to be due to a virus that is not HIV, HBV, HCV, or HEV. Okay, you need to get familiar with these terms. Other viruses which affect the liver probably can be cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr virus, herpes simplex, especially in immunocompromised individuals, and this can be very severe in pregnant ladies. and others are chickenpox, measles, rubella. And in this acute hepatitis, one topic or entity should to be remembered is the fulminant hepatitis. What is fulminant hepatic failure? From the time of the liver itself, if the patient is landing up to liver failure within a time frame of 8 weeks, then it is called as fulminant hepatic failure. Okay. In this, you can treat the patient. If you keep the patient in ICU and you keep on treating the patient, but there is high chance that you can lose the patient. The patient can survive only if liver transplantation is done. So, most common cause of fulminant hepatic failure is vitamin D, and if it's in pregnancy, it is hepatitis E. These are viral causes. But what is the first most common cause of fulminant hepatic failure? Toxins. Toxins are the first most common cause of the fulminant hepatic failure. Then comes your viral causes. What are the toxins? I already discussed paracetamol, mushroom toxins, your ATT drugs, pyrazinamide, okay, and also anesthetic drugs like haloperidol. These fulminant hepatic failure patients, how do they present? The clinical presentation will be with encephalopathy and coagulopathy changes. Encephalopathy, why encephalopathy? Normally, in our gut, the gut bacteria produce lots of ammonia. This ammonia enters the liver, and this ammonia in the liver, it combines with carbon dioxide to form urea, which is excreted in the kidneys. This happens in all of us. But if there is a liver failure, ammonia is not converted to urea. So this ammonia, it enters the brain and it causes metabolic encephalopathy. So how do you identify a patient with metabolic encephalopathy? Hepatic encephalopathy. In earlier stages of hepatic encephalopathy, there will be altered sleep-wake patterns. Okay, daytime will be sleeping, nighttime will be awake, and there will be some disturbances in his mood also. He will be very euphoric, like he will be very active. There will be slurring of sleep. The most reliable sign of hepatic encephalopathy is asterexis, that is flapping pelvis. You should you can also find apraxis. Okay, number joining apraxis. Like construction skills will be lost. You keep some numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 on one paper, and if you tell him to join these numbers, he cannot join because he lost this constructional skills. That is apraxis. And he cannot also name things. In severe grading, in final grades, what happens is that patient will lose his consciousness, like stupor, trauma will set in. His GCS score will be very poor and he will be less than 10. And along with this encephalopathy changes, patient can also have bleeding manifestations. Bleeding manifestations and the bleeding, especially from no supply, because the clotting factors, most of them are produced in liver and cheptanu. If this liver is damaged, no clotting factors, there will be severe bleeding. So you should transfuse fresh frozen plasma, which has a thick concentrate of all these clotting factors. Okay, vitamin K will not be of much useful, but FF is better than vitamin K, because vitamin K to activate the clotting factors, intact hepatocytes should be present, isn't it? But here hepatocytes are not working, so there's no point in giving vitamin K. Okay, a fresh frozen plasma is better. Other blood tests you will do. As the liver is not working, glycogen stores will be reduced, so sugars will be very less. So you should treat the patient with the glucose injections, 10% of glucose is some, vitamin K effect is main enema cheyali, because constipation undipote lots of gut bacteria produce lots of ammonia. So enema, lactose ichistanu. Enta ibbali, at least patient should pass 3 stools a day. That should be your target. And to bacteria static, gut bacteria static sterilize cheyadiki rifaximin istu. Earlier they used to give neomycin, but neomycin has side effect of colonic perforation, so they're not giving it in recent times. And to complete the serious cycle, you give this L-ortholine and L-aspartame. And I told you there will be bleeding. So bleeding aggravates hepatic encephalopathy. So bleeding should be taken care of because encephalopathy will prevent it. So you are treating this patient in ICU and he is not recovering. Then what is your next step? You should think of liver transplantation. So do you want to keep him or send him for transplantation? How do you decide? Based on a score called as MELD score, Modified End-Stage Liver Disease Scoring. Here, three parameters are taken into consideration: PICB, bilirubin, INR, and creatinine levels are taken. If the MELD score is more than 17, then you plan for orthotopic liver transplantation. What is meant by orthotopic? That is, liver is removed and a new liver is placed in the same position. There is one more transplantation called as heterotopic liver transplantation, which is followed in case of kidney, where you don't put kidney portion, you put it in the iliac fossa. Okay. So based on this scoring, you check whether patient needs transplantation also or not. And there's also one more score called as Child-Pugh score, where encephalopathy or other parameters are taken into consideration. It tells you the severity. If that score is more than 7, even then you should plan for liver transplantation. And remember, consent is not required for orthotopic liver transplantation. Sorry, not consent. HLA matching is not required. Okay. For what conditions HLA matching is not required? Cornea transplantation, liver transplantation, heart transplantation, HLA matching is not required. So today our topic of acute hepatitis we discussed under the headings of viral and non-viral. We discussed in detail viral hepatitis. In these all types of viruses, hepatitis B and C are more important. So in hepatitis B, all our healthcare workers should take vaccination on 0, 6 weeks and 10 to 14 weeks. Don't miss vaccination. Even you should take, because in next 2-3 years you will enter your internship where you deal with these needle stick injuries and all. So please don't forget to take this hepatitis B vaccine. And you should also remember that with needle stick injury, it is 30% chance of transmission of this hepatitis B, when compared to HIV, it is only 0.3%. And how should give immunoglobulins, all this, that topic you should concentrate more, because it is practically useful for you in your daily practice. And hepatitis C patient, whenever you suspect and whenever you find RNA positive or antibodies to HCV positive, immediately you should start treatment, because due to high chances of chronicity, you can put patients like at risk if you don't treat them immediately. And there are 2 rules: hepatitis B 90% recovery, hepatitis C 90% suffering. And what are the other points? And we should we should see to that patient is not landing up in pulmonary hepatic failure. And pulmonary hepatic failure with encephalopathy and coagulopathy you detect, and accordingly you should treat, and you should make a decision whether patient needs transplantation or not based on MELD scoring. You should immediately suggest his name for transplantation if the MELD score is more than 70. Okay, and this non-viral causes you can study in detail, but actually those are the major causes for pulmonary